Hello and welcome to the Dragon Shed for the last scroll saw saga of the year. So back with the plywood, which is my kind of trusty go-to wood at the minute. It works really well for a nice flat shape, but I'm going to resort to something else later on, so it's not all plywood in my house. So first of all, I'm making my basic construction out of this kind of slot and key technique that I've I wouldn't say developed, but just kind of grown to use a lot. So yes, that was a broken blade. Anyway, so yeah, first of all I'm cutting out the main outside shape, and then here I'm going to cover it in just some sugar paper, just to reduce the amount of finishing I need to do for the inside of the box. Not being lazy, there's a lot of processes here and I don't want to spend so much time trying to finish that when I should be spending it on the outside. So, and it's very basic, this kind of black paper wrapping I use quite a bit if I don't want to see what's on the inside. I could have used my matte paper, which I've been using a lot recently, but because it's not going to be seen and it's going to be painted at some point, black paper works just as well. So whilst I'm covering these pieces, I'm also constructing the actual box frame itself as I go. See here, they all kind of slot together, and the paper wrap does conceal where the joints are a bit rough, and gives it that kind of neater edge. And then a whole lot of sanding, because it wasn't that neat when it was cut, and there's no way I could get this onto my sanding belt. Not wide enough, so a whole lot of sanding at 40 grit, just to cut back all those edges, get them completely flat, and get rid of any excess paper on the outside, because that's going to get in the way of other things. So ideally I just want the paper on the inside, but I had to wrap it round so it would glue flat. So I'm getting rid of any loose bits and any bits that stick out, essentially. And making a hell of a lot of mess in the meantime. Right, so just having a quick check to see that everything fits, mostly. And I'm going to add some lollipop sticks, which become kind of the second most important part of this build. So here I'm using a couple of pieces of stick just along the front doors to catch the lid. And here I'm using a hell of a lot more. So I've just glued these sticks down onto some paper, and I'm just cutting them to fit the drawers on the inside of the box. Now I was intending to measure and cut these before I put the frame together, but then I thought better of it. So each of these is individually measured for the gap it's going into and numbered, so that I don't put them into the wrong half. So there I'm putting them into the box as they're made, so I know they fit. So I'm just doing the sides first, and I'll come back later on and do front and back. And these are coloured lolly sticks. It doesn't really matter, although colour is appropriate for this part of the project. Lolly sticks are somewhat difficult to cut. You can just cut through them with scissors, but over time, if you're doing a lot like this, then you'll start to really feel it in your hands. So I score a line first and then cut them, which helps to some degree. Going across the grain, going along the grain, just using a craft knife does it pretty much perfectly, really. So yeah, you should really be able to see that box, but I didn't have the camera out wide enough. So the drawer fronts, again, more lolly sticks, and they're all made to fit just inside the frame, the drawer, so they all fit as exactly as possible. That's kind of the kind of watchword for this project, is getting everything as exact as possible. And I don't tend to do exact very well, so this needed quite a bit of sanding, but anyway. And this being a Tardis, it needs to have the appropriate trim around the outside. And for this size of box, lollipop sticks are about right in terms of size in relevant proportion. So more lolly sticks. This entire project used about 250 sticks, I think, which in terms of what I can get in the pound shop, that's 2 packs. So And a lot of sanding to make sure all of these edges are rounded over and really quite smooth. Although that's kind of negated by the next process, but never mind. And making sure everything is level as well. Because if your sides and your back aren't quite level, it doesn't slide properly. And then first coat of paint, I'm using just a plain black here. I know it's not going to be black in the end, I know I'm going to add colour to it, but I find that plain black works better. And this is my cheap water-based stuff. And I find that this also works better if you're going to do any filling. So give it a good layer of black, and it really shows where you need to fill. For whatever the matte kind of paint really shows any kind of indents or gaps anywhere. So everything gets a good coat of black paint, and that gives it a good sanding back, and you can really, you know where you've got to fix stuff. So for the drawers, they all get covered in some tissue paper, and here I've just cut some various colours. So I've got some black, some orange, some pink, some green, a bit of purple. The colour doesn't really matter that much. It's going to be a pop of colour when you pull the drawers out, but you're not going to see them from the front. You'll see why later. So yeah, it takes a while, and it's a very sticky job anyway. I find that using the gluing brush to pick up the paper works better. So here for the drawer fronts, I actually cut one piece of ply that fit into the front of the box, and then cut the drawer fronts from it, so they would be an exact match, which didn't quite work out in the end, but here we go. So I'm just giving them a good general sanding with a 40 grit and then 120, just so they're smooth enough for the next process. And you can see these have all had the paper covering, and here I'm making some knobs. And what I'm using is air dry clay, and I'm just rolling a small ball and then shaping it over a nail, a screw, so that I've got something to anchor onto when I anchor them onto the drawers. So I'm making 14, I only need 12, but extra spares come in handy. Okay, so next we're on to the second coat of paint, and this is a very, very dark blue. It looks black, it's not. it's actually very, very dark blue. Again, because I'm starting at this kind of base coat painting, and I'm kind of going to build up the colour in a different way rather than trying to match the correct colour of this object. So I'm using some CA glue to hold the drawer fronts in place whilst the Gorilla Glue dries. And just kind of removing and clamping those as they're stuck, really. Now I'm on to coat number 3. You can see I'm building up the colour, and again this is the wrong colour for this object. I know, it's very difficult to find this colour anywhere or to know what the colour is, so I'm going for around about the right colour. So I end up with 3 or 4 coats of various shades of blue, and I'm working quite quickly so they're still somewhat tacky. And then my top coat here I'm using a very, very light shade, quite a bit of water, and then I'm just rubbing it off with a piece of felt, so it kind of gives it some texture, some life, so it feels like it's been around a bit. I'm just doing small sections. I'll do the outside of the trim first and then the inside of each of the little corners. Okay, now on to the inside of the box. So I'm starting with just sponging on a very thin black. Again, I'm covering this coloured paper, but you'll see why in a minute. You can still see some of this colour poking through, but most of it's obscured. Now I'm on to something a little bit strange. I'm doing something between a galaxy paint and the time vortex, that kind of idea of rings within rings, just using purple, blue and pink with a bit of silver thrown in. I think it kind of works, though a lot of the pink kind of sinks away and disappears. It looked like it was there when I was putting it on, but then as it dries it goes. So So the temptation is to keep going back and keep touching up, keep going. But you've got to try and stop yourself from going too far. And yes, I have removed the windows. Replace them in a bit. So I'm just going to add some stars all the way around. And now I'm painting my planets. So these are the little clay knobs that I made, and I'm just kind of brushing across them with colour rather than kind of painting as such. Just using various bits and pieces of colour just to get different options. It's a bit fiddly and you can't hold them down any, so they kind of walk around your surface, but that's fine. Now I'm gluing my knobs onto the front of my drawers. So I've screwed a small screw into the front of each one, and I'm using some 5-minute epoxy to glue them on, which did work, but it oozed out quite a bit and it dried opaque, so I had to go back and touch up the paint a little bit. So good layer of some water-based varnish, just to give them some sort of protection from the world. Okay, so that is my little Christmas project done. This is kind of in aid, not in aid, but it's in support of the new female Doctor. Now, I've been a Doctor Who fan since it came back. Even some of the old ones I quite like as well. I've never liked the new Doctors when they turn up. For the first couple of episodes, I don't like them very much. But when they kind of grow into it and become the Doctor, they actually create the Doctor as they want the Doctor to be, then I kind of like them. So I expect that when Jodie Whittaker starts, I'm not going to like the first couple of episodes, and that's not because I'm anti-feminist or anything like that. It's just my idea of the Doctor needs to change again, which I'm getting used to. But just for the first couple of episodes, you really don't like them. So it's just the way my brain works. So this is pretty much finished. I'm not going to do much more to it. I had an issue with the screws on this hinge, and they've popped out through the veneer, which is kind of a risk when you're screwing into veneer. So I've got to do some top-up painting here. I've got a blob of varnish there I need to do something about. And I had some issue with the top of the lid. So when I designed this, I designed it with this mirror tile in mind, and that kind of affects the rest of the proportion of the box, because the measurement of the width of the top is roughly half the height, so that's how you work out your size of TARDIS. So I had that in mind and I worked everything around that, but then I realised that having this in here with there's only a mil or two space means that it now doesn't sit neatly on the little ridges I put around, and it wasn't sitting back and engaging on the little feet that were here, so I've had to Frankenstein together a little block and a couple of screws and a couple of beads just to create a platform here for this to sit on, and that seems to be working fine, so I'll paint that when I get around to the painting.